This is the Amazing Education Podcast. Powered by the Ames Community School District, I'm your host, Eric Smith. On today's episode, we are joined by elementary teacher Laura Clausen. We're going to have an amazing conversation about building relationships with students and what it means to be a kid magnet. Laura Clausen, thank you for being on this episode of the Amazing Education Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good.
We are in April. We're in the end of April. We're getting close to the end of the school year. Are you hanging in there?
Hanging in there, doing great. Trying to get some of that last stuff in before the end.
So do you find it now that we get to the end of the school year where, you see that light at the end of the tunnel and it's sort of like, wow, we still have to, we'd like to get through this and this and this and this. Is that all happening?
It is. I feel like that is the biggest challenge right now, is to fit everything in and make sure that they are so ready for that next grade level.
It's so different than, the fall where you figure, well, we got all year,
It's so relaxing in the fall, and now it's cram time.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on this episode. So the focus of this episode is going to be on, building relationships. So you're an elementary school teacher, second grade.
Yep.
And I was told, and this is why I invited you on here, that you are a kid magnet. And kids absolutely love you. And so let's talk about building relationships. Do you consider yourself a kid magnet?
I've never thought of that before you mentioned it. I have always done things with kids. Back to when I was in high school, I was a coach. I did some coaching on the side when I did start teaching in a small district. So I guess, probably that is probably a good and accurate description.
So building relationships, I have elementary aged kids, and their teacher is probably, one of the top most important people in their life. I mean, they spend so much time with you, and you're like an extension of their family probably for a lot of kids. I mean, I just know that my kids are always talking about like their teacher and what happens in classroom. Is that something that you think about a lot?
It is. I do feel like I spend more waking hours with a lot of kids than they do with their own family.
Yeah.
So I do think that is one of the things that, is really important. It's a relationship that you want to be positive, that families want to be positive, and that other educators want to be positive.
Yeah.
So that kids have that extra adult in their life that they can trust and have a good relationship with. So
how do you approach that, say, at the beginning of the year? I mean, we're in, the spring of the year. You've had, all these students for months on end. But, when we go into the fall, or even thinking back to last fall, how do you approach the school year with students? Oftentimes, it's a new grade. It's a new crew of students that are coming through your classroom. How do you approach building relationships with students at the beginning of the year?
Before the students even start at the beginning of the year, I send out an email to the families when I get my roster, and I ask them to tell me 3 things about their kid that they would really want me to know. 3 positive things about their kid that they would really want me to know. That way, if that first day or that first hour are hard, I've got some things in my back pocket to say, I know you really like Pokemon, or I know that you're really into your cat named whatever. And so I can use that as a strategy. And then I also know what their family sees as their strengths. Mm-hmm. So that really helps me on day 1, hour 1, minute 1. And then right from the get-go, we greet kids at the door every day. We make sure that they feel welcome and that they're in that space where they have other student relationships that are positive, and we wear a smile, and we are doing morning meeting every day, and those things all build that relationship just right away.
For you in your classroom, is it oftentimes relationships first and then academics second?
Yes, because relationships are the key to getting the academics done. I think that helps us to give that flow to the day. They definitely know that they have a positive relationship, and things happen in the day, right, that you just don't foresee. And if you have that strong relationship, usually you can use that relationship to pull them back in to get back into those academics easily.
So how does that some of those strategies, do they come in handy? Like, do they quickly turn a student around, in some of those moments?
Yeah, you can use things like humor with certain students, or you can use things like their likes and dislikes or things that they've just recently read about to kind of turn around somebody's day. Just having that talk sometimes, or just that ear to listen to, and knowing that an adult will give you time and good time is usually the key to turning around somebody's rough day.
So I would imagine one of the keys to being a kid magnet is that, sometimes you're not always thinking about the okay, what kind of strategy can I specifically use, with this student? Like, you just do it. Like, you just go and you just jump in, and you probably see things, cues throughout the day of, wow, that student seems a little off today, or, just in that moment, like maybe something happened. How does like maybe pausing in your day to work with that individual student, like, how does that turn them around?
Sometimes if I notice something, I might notice that somebody's tired, for instance. And if I notice that they're tired, just going over and saying, hey, did you do something fun and that's why you're tired? Or did something happen in your morning where you got woken up if there was a storm or something like that? And sometimes just that ear to hear, like, this is why I'm tired. Or giving them maybe a suggestion of something they can do to sometimes even just stand up and do 10 jumping jacks kind of helps them. And so giving them that suggestion after I've given them a little bit of time, just make sure that they are ready to go. And then they feel that importance of an adult gave me the time and noticed. So
with my kids, I oftentimes see that, you see those cues, like, wow, something maybe isn't quite right. Maybe they're thinking about something, and they don't always come out and say it. And yet when we approach the conversation and have that conversation, you can instantly tell that weight is lifted off. And then, they can kind of resume back to, it's like, oh, they're back.
Yep.
They're back. I'm sure you see it all the time. And it could just be very small things, that may be impacting them for a small amount of time. But you can just tell, you see that, in their eyes, like, oh, they're back.
Yes, absolutely. Even this morning, I had a little boy that was using one of our STEM projects, the launcher, and the rubber band broke. And he was just devastated. And the other adult that had brought in the launcher from the hallway said, I can't make this work. And I got it fixed for him, and he just lit up.
So I would imagine feeling connected to the classroom. I mean, it's essential for all students. I mean, PK through 12, like, they want to feel connected to, in order to be able to learn. So what's the vibe of your classroom? Like, how would you describe the vibe of what's happening on a daily basis?
I think the vibe of my classroom is kind of controlled chaos. So I really like, and I function well with them talking to each other and them using each other to build their own relationships and to learn from each other. So I run the ship, but they are usually the ones in control of talking to each other and learning from their shared experience as they're learning something new. So the vibe of my classroom is controlled chaos, but we also live by the motto that we be kind to everyone all the time. So if you walked into my classroom and asked any of our kids what our motto is, they would say we are kind to everyone all the time. So,
do you have to bring it up throughout the year?
We just do. I don't necessarily have to. They are a very kind group, and I think it's probably because they know that's the expectation, that I won't settle for less than kind.
Have you had it this year where maybe the students took over the steering and you just said, okay, here we go?
Yes.
What was that like, or what was the topic?
Sometimes that happens. And sometimes things come up and you can't anticipate those things, and that learning needs to occur right then and there. And so at that point, I kind of sit back and I listen and I hear what they have to say, because I think that when students know that what they have to say is important, then they get really into that deep learning.
So, like, what was the topic? Or what was the project?
A lot of times it happens in science. So science is pretty hands-on.
Yeah.
And we were doing a plant project, and they decided that they didn't want to kill the plant that was supposed to have no light. And so we had to take a silent vote with our heads down to see who really wanted to kill the plant, and none of them wanted to kill the plant. So they would not do it. Story County Conservation would be very disappointed that we did not kill that plant. We put it in the window, and it is thriving.
So maybe like some social sciences or something happened in, that particular example.
We had some tears. We didn't want to kill the living things, and so I let them drive that day.
Oh, that's really funny. Now when they do that, do they kind of feel like, do they get that sense of like, wow, like they can own their learning and that power, and then it comes up even more often?
Definitely. Another plant did die in that experiment, so they feel like they saved one in replation.
Okay.
They really, they talk about it all the time. That's the poor plant that died, and that's the one that we saved. And then you can just see in their eyes that they had the ownership over that, and they really loved it and connected well with the experiment, knowing that they would kill that plant in that cupboard.
Okay, fair enough. So with the classroom, how does, building those relationships with students, how does that translate maybe to the building-wide culture as well? Because obviously, you're in your grade, you have classrooms next to you, and then it can kind of expand to the building as well. How do students feel connected to the building by being in your classroom, do you think?
I think that our building is a great place to be.
Yeah.
I think that every teacher functions pretty much the same as me. We focus on relationships, we focus on our PBIS expectations, and we really make sure that we are giving those tickets out to kids when we notice that they're doing something well, and then we give specific feedback related to that. So they will know that they might do something out in the hallway that I have trained them to do, walk quietly down the hallway or something, and some adult might notice and give us a class ticket, or give them a personal ticket for how they're doing, and then give them that explicit feedback, and they really do well with that, and I think that that's just the way our building goes.
Yeah. How does, so I'm going to put my parent hat on now, so how does, those relationships in the classroom, how does that correlate to, I would imagine over the course of a year, building some relationships with parents as well? What does that look like?
I have a unique perspective because I also live in the community that I teach in, and so my kids are also Edward's kids, and or were, in Caitlin's case. But I see my families all the time. Yeah. Some of them live on the same street that I do, so we came in with some sort of a relationship, but then we also we build so much because I'm helpful to their child, and that just people just treasure that, which is great, and we feel appreciated.
It's got to be incredibly valuable, though, just to I know that when our kids see, their teacher outside of school, it's a little bit out of context, but it's also really exciting for them. It's really cool. And they kind of want to show off their teacher a little bit too. Do you get that?
Oh yeah. I cannot go to the pool in the summer and not have 25 kids come up and say hi to me. So
that has to be pretty bucket filling, though.
It is very bucket filling. It's great.
I mean, the classrooms can be challenging on any given day and any given moment, but when you think about the course of the year or many years teaching, that's pretty incredible.
It is. There's no other profession like it. I feel like it impacts everything in our society, and I think when you think of it in that's pretty heavyweight, but it's also pretty great.
So what have been, teaching is nonstop, and I think for people who are not in, the education world or the teaching world, I don't know, it's just difficult to fully understand that teaching is nonstop, and I know that you feel it. How do you get through that?
I think that, like I said before, we have a great building. I have great colleagues. I have a lot of things that I like to do. Like I like to jog. People in our community see me out jogging. I'm not the fastest runner in the world, but I like to. And so I think keeping watch over making sure that I feel good about how I'm starting my day is something great. And then just, remembering that it's one day at a time, one foot in front of the other, and we can get through it.
I always found that the school year moves in phases. My phases are probably very different from yours. Do you think about it in that way? I mean, you start the year and, you have many months ahead of you. Obviously, there's the seasons, but do you go through phases in the school year in the second grade classroom?
We do. We are at the phase now where I would say that we are like a family. Sometimes a very, very well-functioning family, and sometimes we are like brothers and sisters in there. And you have like the, I need some space or I need a moment. So we definitely, in the beginning of the year, you don't know each other as well. You don't have those connections. You don't have, you're a little bit more apprehensive for anything. And then as the school year wears on, there are a lot of times where, you can see different student relationships developing, or you learn something about a child or a family that you feel like, that gives me a little different insight, and that those, as we go through, those relationships begin to grow deeper, but they also become something that you can really value because you can use it so much to help the students get where they need to go at the end of the year.
So with those types of students, so we have twins, we have a boy and a girl, and I would say that we have one of each. We have, one that will very much initiate, socially, and one that it takes a lot. And I would imagine you have both of those groups in your classroom. So how do you mix them all together to get everyone involved?
I definitely have some introverts and extroverts in my classroom for sure. And sometimes I want to honor the fact that sometimes kids don't want to necessarily work with a group and they want to just have a little bit of alone time. And you just have to do that. You just have to give them that space, because without that, they don't feel connected and heard.
Sure.
So if they need that, then that's what I do. And if somebody is a complete extrovert like me, then they get their energy from other people. So you can kind of use just your judgment and give everybody what they need. And still, at times, of course, I always need to tell them there's times in life where you have to work with other people.
Yeah.
So we're just going to do this, and I'll help you through it.
I would imagine when you get a couple students, even one-on-one, they really open up as well. Some students, they don't want to be in the front of the classroom and do that public speaking, but boy, they have a lot to share and a lot to tell you when you get them one-on-one.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that they love, is a little bit of time where it's just one-on-one or one-on small group. We definitely get to do that during reading groups, and you can see the reading groups that they just flourish during that time because they love to talk and they love to have attention. So that's when we get to do that the most.
So when you ever run into this situation, because you've built these relationships, you come in on a Monday, you're greeting, and all the students have everything to say to you on what happened over the weekend. Or, I mean, we had, I don't remember if it was our son or daughter, but they're like, oh yeah, I told, Mrs. So-and-so that, we did that. I'm like, oh my God, and it wasn't anything bad, but it was just like, are you serious? Like, I'm sure these conversations happen all the time.
They do. They do. And you'd be surprised at all the things that I've heard over the years.
Oh yeah, no, I can only imagine. You can probably write a book.
I probably could. I probably should.
Yeah, right. Oh my goodness. But I see that as a really positive thing, and it wasn't an embarrassing thing for me or anything, but I see that as a great thing because they feel connected to the classroom, and I hope you feel that as well.
They love it, and I love it.
Yeah.
I love to hear about what they have to say.
Probably puts a smile on your face because you're like, oh, I know those parents or whatever,
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's pretty fun.
Absolutely.
So what gets you going? What keeps you coming back every day, every week, every month, every year? I mean, what is it? I mean, because we're kind of now on the tail end of what have been some really challenging years for teachers and education as a whole, and we're kind of coming through that. And we were just talking just prior to this. Hopefully the summer can kind of revive everyone, and we can have truly back to a normal school year next year. I think in some ways this year has been some of that, or at least we transition into some of that. But what keeps you going?
Watching kids learn and grow is so fun for me. It's something that I've wanted to do since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to be a teacher. And so I think that just knowing that was my lifelong goal and dream has really helped keep me going. But they have been challenging years. And I think that just knowing that we can get through anything after these last couple years keeps me coming back for more.
Have you been just super impressed with the resiliency of students? I mean, they just roll with it.
They are the model for adults. I think that if we were all as easygoing as the kids are, I think that it would be just so much easier for all of us.
Wouldn't it though? I mean, their resilience and they can just flow with it at times. And I just love that part about kids that age, but students in general. It's that in and of itself is a life skill to just be able to embrace.
I agree. They are the ones that we should model our behaviors after.
Do you shift gears sometimes throughout the day? Does it throw them off?
Oh, yeah. After lunch is always a challenging time. So sometimes you just have to shift and do something completely unexpected so that they realize that they are going to get back into it. There's all kinds of times where we're always shifting, just depending on what's going on in the classroom.
Have you ever had to do that because, and maybe it was a difficult decision because that's what the class needed at the time? Maybe you paused what you had planned completely and just completely shifted gears?
Absolutely. That happens a lot. That
Really?
happens more often than you'd think. And it's hard because as a PLC, as a professional learning community, the four of us always try to stay on the same thing on math and the same thing on foundations. And sometimes there are times where we've got to say, hey, I did not get to this because my students needed this at that time. And everybody is pretty responsive to that, and we can always come up with something else that we can fit into those other three classrooms that didn't need that. So that happens quite often, and you just got to roll with it. You got to take that lead from your students and just go with it.
And that's an interesting concept, and we could almost probably do an entire episode really on that concept, because I think a lot of people, in whatever their work is, as an adult may be very used to that, and yet, I've read and seen things that, everything is planned out and should be planned out between, Monday and Friday and on this month, and everything should be planned out, and that's just not the way it works in education. I mean, you have, 20-some second graders in your classroom, and sometimes things happen in the real world, that impact what happens in the classroom, and that shift is needed because it's what's best for students.
Absolutely. And I think that, flexibility is a really, really hard thing to teach.
Yeah.
So you just have to model it a lot. Being flexible in our curriculum, being flexible in which book we might be reading because this is what they need is key to their success as an adult, because flexibility is something that we all need.
So talk to me about outcomes of, if we focus on relationships, like what outcomes come of that?
So I have had resilient readers come of that. I've had people that were resistant readers that once they had a relationship and they knew and they could see the purpose of the why, they've really flourished. And so there's research out there that says why a student and a teacher need positive relationship.
Yeah.
And that can be one of the greatest effects on their education. If they have that positive adult interaction and that positive teacher in their life, then they can grow and their academics flourish because of it.
What's the difference between those two readers that you talked about?
The resistant readers are usually the ones that I have to find a book that's just right and hook them.
Yeah.
Or I have to give them the why. And then I
Okay.
have those people that you could give them the dictionary to read and they would be content to do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it always just depends on what the kid likes and is ready for.
Yeah.
And so then at that time, I just have to roll with it, and I have to do some digging and figure out how I can get that one that's resistant, how I can get a hook and get them to want to be a reader.
How good does that feel?
That is the best feeling.
Is it?
That's the best feeling. That is the why to teaching.
Yeah.
When you have somebody that does not want to do something like reading and then they become a reader at the end of the year. I have one right now that I'm just thinking of in my brain, and I'm thinking how proud I am of that reader.
You changed that student's trajectory. I mean, you really did. Do you think about that a lot?
I don't ever think about that.
Yeah.
But it is fun to think about.
Yeah.
But just the day in and day out, you don't have time to really stop and think about
You
that.
probably
But
don't.
that is pretty cool to think about.
I'd encourage you to do it. Actually, I encourage all teachers to do it. It's truly incredible. I think oftentimes because it's so hectic throughout the day, we never have time, and you still, you're going to those students again the next day to reflect on, the accomplishments that have been made. But, we're now at the end of April, and I'm certain that you've seen an immense amount of just things that you could point to be like, wow, like that's incredible that happened in our classroom.
And it is. And once we get like even closer to the end here, I will stop and I'll reflect, because I usually put together a little video for my students at the end of the year and tell them how proud I am of them, and then look through all my pictures that I took in the year and create, that memory for them that they can take home and they can keep, and then they can think about second grade and how we were as that family of second graders.
Yeah.
And that's when I do probably my biggest amount of reflection on
my gosh.
how far they've really come.
Yeah.
And how much even physically they've grown in a year. You look at those pictures of their first day and you think, wow, they really shot up this year. Or their hair is totally different, or...
Is it hard getting to the end of the year? Is it hard saying... I mean, it's kind of goodbye, kind of not. Like, you'll see all those students again next year, but just in a different way.
Yeah. It'll never be the same. So on the last day of school, I'm always a giant mess. I'm always crying. And yes, I'm a giant mess. And it is hard.
I think that's okay.
You spend so much of your time with them and you invest so many feelings and emotions. And they do the same.
I was going to say, it goes both ways.
Yeah. And it's never the same. Even when you see each other in the hallway, it's not that same, like, I'm going to see you day in and day out for the next 180 days.
Was it tougher the first couple of years? Or is it just tough every year?
It's just tough every year. It's just tough every year. I don't know if it was tougher the first couple of years.
Okay.
I think it's just about the same all the time.
I bet.
And
because each class is different.
This is the 5th grade class that's leaving was my first kindergarten class at Edwards, so that's going to be really tough to watch them walk away.
But you've been there kind of the whole time. Like, you could just kind of see them go through everything.
Yep. I was there when they were itty bitties, when they were in kindergarten, and now I'm watching them become
middle schoolers. Oh, you blink and then this is what happens.
Yep. That's absolutely right.
So I don't know if advice is the right word, but we'll use it. Like, what advice would you give to new teachers? Just when thinking about relationships, how do you be a kid magnet?
I think that my biggest piece of advice would just be to listen to kids, listen to what they have to say. They want to be heard.
Yeah. and they probably have a lot to say. And maybe we don't give them enough voice at times.
I think that in the world that we live in, we need to stop, pause, and give them that space and that time.
Thank you, Laura, for being on this episode of the Amazing Education Podcast. I kind of had chills a couple times through that conversation. I'm not going to lie. So, anyway,
Awesome.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.